Hello and welcome to Module 2. In this module, I will discuss test cases and test scenarios and how to create them both. So what is a test case? Well, a test case is a set of test inputs, execution conditions, and expected results developed for a particular objective, such as to exercise a particular program path or to verify compliance with a specific requirement. The language. A test case should be very simple and easy to understand. Someone with little or no knowledge of that system or the functionality should be able to understand a test case. So what are the characteristics of a good test case? It should be very simple, as I mentioned. It should be traceable to a particular requirement. A test case should be repeatable and reusable. It should also have a unique name assigned to it. There are different types of test cases. Here I've listed just a couple. You have a functionality test case. A functionality test case is used to discover if an application interface works with the rest of the system and its users. Generally, the author of a functionality test case is a software tester. Then you have the user interface test case. And these test cases are used to verify the specific piece of the graphical user interface, that is the GUI, and how it looks and how it should perform. So take, for example, you have a text box on an application, and that text box, the requirement states that it should accept only alpha characters. Well, tester would test that form out of that field out to make sure that that field accepts only alpha characters. And here's just some more information on a GUI test case. They can be used to identify cosmetics, inconsistency, grammar, and spelling errors, links, and other elements that the user interacts with or sees. And they are also generally written by the software testing team. However, sometimes there might be a design team that will create a user interface or a GUI test case. And here's just an example of a test case. Let's review just some of the fields. The system that will be tested here in this test case, they're testing an ATM system. They also have the subsystem that they're testing. They're testing the PIN functionality. They have a short description here. They're testing the ATM change PIN service. We have some preconditions. So before this test case is executed, there are some things that must take place prior to executing this test case. So here's just 3 of them that are listed. The user has a valid ATM card. The user has accessed the ATM by placing his ATM card in the machine. The current PIN is 1234, and the system displays the main menu. So again, these are some preconditions. Here are the steps, as well as the actions that should be performed, what the expected results are. So after a user or a tester clicks the change PIN button, the system should display a message asking the user to enter the PIN. If anything else outside of this happens, this test case will fail. There's also a pass and fail column, as well as a comment column. So let's discuss test scenarios and what they are. Test scenarios is a functionality that can be tested. It is also called a test condition or a test idea. As a tester, you may put yourself into the end user's shoes and figure out the real-world scenario and use case of the application that's under test. So say, for example, you're testing the ATM PIN functionality, and the system requirement states that the ATM PIN accepts 4 numeric characters. As a tester, you want to come up with several ideas on how to test that ATM PIN functionality. The requirement stated that it accepts only 4 numeric characters. So, one of the tests you can conduct is testing the system to ensure that it accepts only 4 numeric characters. You can also come up with another test. Another test would be to try to test the ATM PIN with more than 4 numeric characters. And another scenario, another test idea would be to test the system to see if it would accept 3 numeric characters. And again, these are just some examples of test scenarios and test ideas to test out a ATM functionality.
Here, as you can see on your screen here, is a copy of a system requirement specification for an application that is called Cyclos. In this demonstration, you will see exactly what a software tester does. The software tester read and analyze requirements. They then generate test scenarios and test cases. On the right-hand side of the screen is actually an example of some test scenarios that I will review later on. So let's move forward reviewing the Cyclos system specifications. So what I'm doing right now, I'm going to just scroll down to the functionality that we will be testing, and that is the login functionality requirement. That is requirement number 1. So let's scroll down to that requirement. And here's just some information about the Cyclos website. And I'm just moving forward. To access the website, here is the URL. And I'll just make a copy of it because we will log on to it later on. And let me scroll down. So here, requirement number 1 is the login functionality requirement. Here's a screenshot of the landing page or the home page of the Cyclos application. And for this exercise, we will write test scenarios and test cases for these requirements below. Requirements 1.1.1, .2, and .3. So let's review. In requirement 1.1.1 for this system login page, when a user logs in successfully, they should receive a message stating, "Welcome to Cyclos version da 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 da." And then requirement number 2, when a user enters an invalid error message, when a user enters the wrong login name or password, they will receive a message stating the given login name or password is incorrect. Please try again. In .3, the user will receive another message when the login name or the password fields are left blank. The message that they will receive is the action could be processed as there was a validation error. Login name is required or the password is required. Here's just some more additional information about just some of the fields, the mandatory fields for that login, those login fields. So you have the login name and the password here. These both are mandatory fields. The minimum data field value that's required for the login name field is 4. The maximum amount is 16. And that field should only accept alpha and numeric characters. The password field, the minimum value accepted is 4. The maximum is 25. And this is also a mandatory field. So I'm going to move the screen over here just a little bit more. And as you can see, the requirements, there's some more information about this new user registration functionality. The name, the login name, the email address, these are all mandatory fields. These are some additional fields that are on that new user, for the new user registration. It is mandatory that this checkbox, I agree with the above registration agreement. That box must be checked along with this visual validation information. That information must be entered in this new code field before clicking submit. And here's some additional information about the new user registration functionality. The tester would read this information as well to assist them in writing their test scenarios. So I'm going to scroll down here a little more, and here are some more information about the other fields associated with the new user registration. The mobile phone field, no information is required. This is not a mandatory field, as you can see. And as I mentioned, these are some additional information about that new user registration. So let's move over to this decision table. And the decision table is a technique that a tester could use to aid them in creating test scenarios and coming up with test ideas. And as you learned earlier in the system requirements, the name, the login name and email address, as well as the password, the confirm password, I agree with the above registration checkbox, and the new code text box. These are all mandatory fields. So in the decision table, what a tester would do is create this table, list all of these field names. And in the scenario 1 here, Y means yes. Yes, the valid value is entered into that field. And the login, the same thing, as well as the email address. So, and once the user clicked the submit button, they should receive two things. They should receive the message stating that, thank you for registering. We're going to put yes right here. And then they should also receive a validation message in their email informing them for some additional steps or additional things that they should do before they log in. Next, we are going to test the second scenario. And if I can go back over here to the system requirements and requirements 1.1.2, we're going to create a scenario for this one. And in that one, when a wrong name or password is provided, they should receive an error message. So we're going to test that feature out as well. And so here we put in a valid name, and in the login name, we're going to put in the wrong name in the login name field. The email address is correct. Now what should happen here, the user should not receive thank you for registering because they put in invalid information into that login name field as the system requirement stated. And then here in the email address field, they're not going to receive an email, because they put in incorrect information. However, they will receive a message informing them that that login name and that password is incorrect. Please try. So here the answer should be yes, or yes should appear in this box. Next, we're going to test the .3 functionality. And in this one, it states that when those fields are left blank, another message should appear. So here in test scenario 3, this time we're going to leave that field blank, the login name field. And instead of receiving this error message that the information is incorrect, the user should receive, or the tester should receive, another message. And that message should state the action could not be proceeded as there was the validation error. The login name and or the password is required. And here we're going to answer yes. So after the tester has created all of their scenarios, they're going to convert those scenarios into test cases. Now, as you can see here, there are some additional scenarios that a tester could create to test this functionality out. They could come up with some other scenarios where the email address is left blank. But for time, we're just going to test these 3 requirements here. So let's move on to the test case. And the test case name is new user registration. The system is Cyclos. And the subsystem is the new user registration. So the name of the test case is new user registration, and the system we're testing is the Cyclos new user registration. So what is the purpose of this test? Well, the purpose of this test is to test the login functionality to ensure that it's functioning as designed. You could put something similar to this, or you can put that you're testing to make sure that the new user functionality function as designed. You also want to put the author's name, and in this example, I put my name, the date the test case was created, and any preconditions, anything that the tester should do before they can execute these steps. That information should go on the test case. And in this case, we have just one. And basically, the user must be, the tester should be on the Cyclos homepage or the landing page before they can execute step 1. Now let's go to the actual test case. This test case right here, this is the first test. And if you recall, we created 3 scenarios. So this test ID and this one represents the first test. Then we have a step 1. And if you recall, in the definition of test cases, we stated that a test case, the language should be very simple. So which means anyone with little or no knowledge of the Cyclos application, this person should be able to pick this test case up and execute these steps. And so let's review the action, the first step. Click on the register link located in the upper right-hand corner of the Cyclos homepage. This is just a step. The expected results. So after that user clicks that link, the expected results states that the new user registration page should appear. Appears, not should, appears. The second step, that you should enter some information, and in this case, we're entering test green into the name text box. What should happen after you enter that? Test green appears in the name text box. So basically, you have an action, and then in the expected results, you're then listing what should happen after that action. And I'll just scroll on down a little bit further here. And in the final step, after they've entered all of the mandatory information and click the submit button, let's go to step number 9. They click the submit button. That thank you message should appear. Then next, the tester would log into their email account. They've logged in successfully, and they should have the email address, an email from Cyclos. They log in and take steps from there. Here is the second test case that we created, a test scenario. And in this test, if you recall, we're going to put some invalid data into their login name field. Now, the login, based upon the system requirement, it states that the login name, the minimum value is 4. But as you can see here, we have 3. And what should happen when they click submit? That error message should appear. And that final test case, we did the same thing, but in step 3, instead of putting invalid test data, we left out that field blank. And the message that appeared stated that the action couldn't proceed because there was validation error, login name and or password is required.